Welcome everybody to another choir practice episode. Cheers. It is the end of November and hope everybody had a happy Thanksgiving. We had a great one here at our house. It was awesome. So I'm Lima Charlie again, and this is choir practice. This is the 4th episode. And real quick, I just want to say thanks everybody who's taking the time out of their day to look at these and leave comments and give me some feedback and some ideas on what to talk about. So I do appreciate it. Again, end of November, and I have kind of a sad announcement. First of all, an update. You can see that the No Shave November, or Movember for mustache, has gone pretty well. But sadly, it's coming to time when I'm going to have to shave the mustache. It's getting to a dangerous level where the mustache itself has achieved a level of power and sexiness that is now exceeding my ability to control it. So in the interest of all the folks out there, all the men and women who admire it, adore it, and love it, I am going to have to shave it here in a couple days, the 1st of December. So this is probably the last time you're going to see the fabulous stash. Until next year, when November hits again. So that's the update on the stash. I want to start off with a couple of quotes that kind of resonated with me over the last couple of weeks. One is, strive to be the man that everybody wants to be, but the very few are willing to be. And I'll explain that in a second. And the second one is, when you're talking about yourself as part of a team, kind of bleeding off the last podcast, is remember this: you're either an asset or you're a liability. It's up to you to decide which one you are. So strive to be the man that everyone wants to be. So I think about this, about the the badass cops out there, the operators, stuff like that, that everybody looks up to and wants to be. And you look at those people, they're usually very driven, very competitive, and they are committed to excellence. To them, excellence is the little things you do every day, so it's more of a habit than a single event for them. And everybody wants to be like them. Everybody kind of emulates them, goes to them for advice and so forth. But very few people are willing to put in the effort, the time, the blood and sweat to actually be that person. And I think that's what you should strive to be, is strive to be the person that everybody wants to be, but the person that very few are willing to be or put in the effort. And that's what makes rock stars, is they do all the extra stuff, and they push themselves to places other people just aren't willing to go. So I thought that was kind of a cool quote. I had a question from my buddy Sam, in asking what I should talk about on these recordings. And of course, it was a very loaded question. It was, how did the Black Lives Matter, the BLM movement, affect me personally and my job? So we'll get to that here in a couple minutes. But I got a couple good stories from you from the last week or so. One, which is a win, doesn't happen very often, is we had a call of a 39-year-old female who had suffered a seizure, and she was unconscious and not breathing. I was just right around the block, so I responded, knowing that I would beat medics there. And there's a funny side to this story too, but I'll end with that. So I show up, I go in, and her fiance is trying to do CPR. He obviously had no idea what he was doing, or had no training with it. He's not doing it appropriately. So I got him out of the way, told him that I was there to help and take over. I had him go outside and wait for medics so he could usher them in, and I took over CPR. Did CPR for, 3 or 4 minutes on her. I'll be honest with you, I thought she was a goner. She was pale, had no pulse, wasn't breathing, and her eyes just had that glazed over look. And you got to keep in mind, by the time dispatch gets its call and it gets aired to us and I arrive, she'd probably been unconscious without a pulse or breathing for about 4 or 5 minutes. So I did CPR again on her for several minutes. Didn't get any response from her. Kept checking for a pulse and stuff, just making sure her airway was open. Medics show up, so I give them a quick sit rep. They relieve me, take over, and I start collecting information, figuring that I'm going to be calling for a coroner and victim advocates and all that stuff here shortly. Anyway, long story short is the medics were able to get a return to spontaneous circulation, I think is the term. Anyway, they were able to pick up that her heart was starting to do some stuff on its own. They transported her to a local hospital, and sure enough, she made it. So that's kind of cool. That's a win. I've done CPR on several people, and I've never had somebody survive. So that was kind of a neat experience for me. I like to think that she's got a second chance now. So that's a win. That's a positive story. Now, my second story is kind of one of those what the frack stories. It has me baffled. I'm still trying to scratch my head. Now, I was not directly involved with this call, and it wasn't necessarily my agency. It was an agency within our jurisdiction, but they had a call of a physical domestic violence with a male party. This happened in an apartment complex. Male party was beating on his girlfriend or wife. I don't remember what it was. Enough where he assaulted her. He knocked her down, shoved her around. He was drunk. And at some point, he grabs a gun, a firearm, and he points it right in her face, right? So he felony menaces her. He also broke a bunch of her belongings. I don't know what he did. Threw them around, shattered them, stuff like that. When she tried to call 911, he took the phone away from her, so he prohibited her from calling 911. That's another crime. So we have multiple crimes here. We got felony menacing, pointing a gun at someone's face, assaulting them, possession of a firearm when you're drunk, prohibited use, breaking her stuff, criminal mischief, and prohibiting her from making a 911 call. So anyway, she's able to grab a phone, and she flees from the apartment, goes to a local grocery store. She calls 911, and police show up. So they get the whole story. This is fresh pursuit. This just happened, so it wasn't like there was, even an hour had passed. They're able to ascertain that he is still in the apartment. His vehicle's parked out front. They get a phone number for the suspect from the victim. They call him, verify he's still in the apartment. They order him to come out of the apartment, and he basically says, "Kiss off, I'm not coming out. Come and get me," whatever. So that has like all the makings for an armed barricaded party. He got several charges. He's in there. No one else is in the apartment. The victim is safe, but you still have that fresh pursuit because this literally just happened. So 9 times out of 10, in my humble opinion, that would turn into a SWAT call out for a barricaded subject, and we go in to get the guy. This agency, for whatever reason, said, okay, we will go ahead and leave and just take a report. So it's kind of interesting because with domestic violence in our state, it says you shall arrest without delay. If you can determine a crime is committed, you will arrest. So I'm not sure what happened there. We are all kind of just scratching our heads, wondering what the heck happened there. So who knows? Maybe I'll have an update on that later on. I'm sure there's some information I'm unaware of and so forth. And again, this is all just my personal opinion, not representing my agency or anybody else. It just, I don't get it. So anyway, so back to the question: how has Black Lives Matter, that movement, impacted me personally in my job? So it's a great question, Sam. To be honest with you, it really hasn't impacted me. I don't work in a jurisdiction where I have to respond to a bunch of riots and stuff like that. It's what has happened since then, kind of the knee-jerk reaction by some of our legislatures, media, uneducated or uninformed public and stuff like that. And a couple things with that. There's a lady named Candace Owens. She's brilliant. I'd love to see her run for office at some point. But she has a documentary out, and it is specifically about the lie of Black Lives Matter and how what happened with all the millions and millions of dollars that they got to support their cause. And what do they do with it? You can Google it, YouTube it. I don't have a link for it, but Candace Owens on the lies of Black Lives Matter. She does a much, much better job than I could ever hope of doing it. She's smarter than I am, and she does a really good job. I will say that my biggest issue with Black Lives Matter is I think the whole thing was a fraud. What it was based on was a bunch of lies, and I think that there are just certain people in society that thrive on chaos. And I think the people that funded and founded Black Lives Matter only wanted to drive a wedge between law enforcement and the public, and they wanted to see chaos ensue. And they also wanted to get rich doing it. So my issue is I don't care what your stance is, and I don't care when you're trying to start a movement for a change and all that stuff, super. But when you base it off situations that were misconstrued and not portrayed correctly, and that's what you base your whole movement on, and then after investigations are done, it turns out that those situations were wrong. They were portrayed wrong, and that the cops were actually completely justified in what they did and actually did a good job. I think the honorable or respectable thing would be like, hey, we based this whole movement on some lies. We found out after the investigations and all that stuff were done, which we should have waited to see in the first place, that we were actually wrong. We apologized and we would, do the right thing. And they did not. They continued to perpetuate these lies. And what it did is it didn't really hurt police at the moment. I mean, police, for the most part, weren't getting attacked or anything like that. It was, businesses and private citizens whose cars were overturned and lit on fire, and businesses that were burned and looted. So I'm not sure the chaos that ensued with that was misdirected. I think a lot of people just like to see the chaos and be a part of something, and they really don't have any idea what they're talking about. Let's go back to that last call, the domestic violence, where the police just walked away instead of arresting the suspect. I think that is a residual effect of the Black Lives Matter thing. I think that when you had cops, the Michael Brown situation, there's been a whole bunch of them. I don't have time to go into all of them, where cops were wrongly accused, subsequently fired and charged for taking action. But after the investigation is proven that they did absolutely the right thing and were completely justified, I think what that's made a lot of cops do is just, they're scared. They don't want to act. They don't want to go in and get a domestic violence suspect who's armed, who just beat up his girlfriend and pointed a gun in her face, because they're afraid that it's going to lead to a shooting. And if it does, they're afraid that they're going to get sued, misrepresented by the media, and even maybe possibly punitively or otherwise punished by their administration, because a lot of the administration out there, I'm talking generally, is so scared of getting sued or looking bad in the media that they would rather not act than act and err. They're afraid of, even if they act in good faith and they're trying to do the right thing, but they make a mistake, they're going to be hung out to dry. So it's easier just not to do anything, because then you can't really get blamed until a suspect goes and kills the victim later on or something like that. So that's my 2 cents with that. Let's see. Yeah, I just think a lot of admin and some cops are just to the point they're scared of doing anything because they don't want to get in trouble. I'll give you another some interesting stats that I was able to find out. This is all public knowledge, so I'm not sharing anything confidential or anything like that. You can look it up. Give me just a second while I pull it up. So this is reference auto thefts in my state. So my state has a distinct honor currently of being rated number 1 in the entire nation for auto thefts. So, and we are not a state where you would think we would be number 1, but we are. So according to stats, we are number 1 for the entire nation in the number of auto thefts that takes place. So some stats. Since 2019, our monthly motor vehicle theft rate has increased 120.6%. And that puts us at number 1 in the nation. In the first 6 months of 2022, January to June, the trend has continued, and the motor vehicle theft rate has increased another 17.3%. Criminals stole over 24,000 motor vehicles in the first 6 months, and that's 3,463 more than the same period in 2021. The monthly theft rate is now at 68.56 vehicles per 100,000 persons. And this is where it gets interesting, okay? So the secondary, because people are like, motor vehicle theft, it's a property crime, who cares? It's not just a property crime. The secondary offenses related to motor vehicle theft have increased more than 6-fold. Drug crimes involving motor vehicle theft have increased 1,110%. 1,110% increase. And that's drug crimes involving motor vehicle theft. Violent crimes involving motor vehicle theft have increased 521%. 521%. And property crimes involving motor vehicle theft has increased 583%. So that's what's astonishing to me. And I think that, so kind of put that in perspective, that's like me going to a coffee shop, order my coffee, and last week it cost $4. I go on today and it costs $50. That's kind of the increase we're talking about, right? But I think what we're seeing is that a secondary question is, how does BLM impacted me? Me personally, not a whole lot. There's been some knee-jerk legislature that changed the way we do our jobs, a bunch of extra paperwork we have to do. We have to record a bunch of, information, statistical information for every contact we go on and stuff like that. We're under the microscope more and all that good stuff. But the secondary question is, how has it impacted you, citizens, the society that we serve? Because we are, bottom line is we are that thin blue line that protects you from chaos, right? Most people do the old ostrich thing. They walk around every day in their own protective bubbles. And they really have no idea what goes on in their city. Their view of the world is this kind of a candy-coated view of the world. What they don't know is just underneath that sweet candy coat, there's the real world, and there's a lot of bad, evil stuff that happens down there that you're unaware of. You're usually not aware of it until you, it impacts you personally. So it's easier just to pretend it doesn't exist. But I'm telling you, it is just that far underneath that candy coat. Most people have no idea what goes on. All right. So with that said, is the secondary question, how has that impacted you? Well, when you have cops that don't feel supported and feel like they are being sought out and unjustly crucified for doing the best they can in quickly evolving or devolving situations where they don't know the whole story, but they have to make, use of force decisions in microseconds sometimes to defend themselves or other people. And no matter what they do, they're painted out to be the bad person. Again, you have a lot of cops, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but you have a lot of police officers out there who are now scared to act. And why should they? They can go to work and do nothing all day and get paid the same amount of money as if they were going out being highly proactive and trying to catch bad guys. Right? And there's a lot less risk. So from a business standpoint, one makes sense. I don't personally agree with that, but that's just what's happening out there. So what you see is you have cops are being told you can't pursue stolen vehicles. And the bad guys know this. They know that the more reckless they drive and the more aggressive they are, the less likely they are to be pursued. So when a cop pulls behind them and turns on the cherries above, they just take off and they drive into oncoming traffic and they do horribly reckless things because they know the cops won't pursue them. The whole movement to depopulate the jails, and we're not even accepting people into jail unless it's serious crimes, and we're releasing all these people from jail. So what do you expect is going to happen? If there is no structure and protection pushing back against the evil and the chaos, then the chaos and evil will continue to move forward. Bad guys aren't going to stop by themselves. They're not going to just wake up one day and be like, oh man, I read the Bible last night and I'm being a bad person. I should quit doing this. They only stop for fear of consequences. Jordan Peterson has a great segment on that, where most people aren't good because they're inherently good. Most people are good because they fear consequences. Where we take away the perceived consequences, people are going to do bad things. But you see that with a number of auto thefts, secondary violent crimes, all the drug crimes, vehicle trespasses, burglaries, robberies, you name it. There's no fear of consequences right now, so the bad guys think it's a free-for-all, and they're just out causing mayhem and stuff like that. And I think that's really what is the better question is, how has the BLM movement impacted the citizens? Well, you have cops that aren't being proactive because they're afraid to be, quite honestly, and they don't have the support that they used to have from either the administration, not all administration, but some administration. The media obviously doesn't support law enforcement, and the citizens, for the most part, don't understand, so they don't support. So when you take that protective buffer away, the criminal element in crime is just going to peak, and that's what you're seeing. Is you see domestic violences where you have a suspect located, contained, and controlled, and they won't go in and get him because they don't want it to turn into a shooting because they're afraid they're going to get made out to look bad, or they're going to get sued or whatever. You have auto thefts in my state that are out of control. I mean, 1,100% increase, 500% increase in secondary crimes. It's unbelievable how many auto thefts happen every single day. I think the general public just doesn't know it because, politicians don't let it get out there. The media doesn't let it get out there because they don't want to look bad. They want to be perceived that they're making the streets safer when, in fact, the streets are getting ridiculously dangerous. So that's kind of my answer to the BLM question. I think that the majority of what we saw was based off people who want chaos and wanted to make money, and they are driving a wedge between law enforcement and the communities that we serve. And it's really sad because it was based off a lot of lies and so forth. So that's my 2 cents on that. None of the stats, none of the stories that BLM was out there presenting are statistically supported. If you want to look at some real true stats, you can go to the FBI website, and they do annual reports every year that break down every shooting, every officer-involved shooting that happens around the United States. Tells the age and race of the cops involved, the age and race of the persons involved, nature of the call, time of day, was it fatal, was it injury, all that stuff. And the truth is that the stories that were purported by BLM and a bunch of very liberal media are not statistically founded or truthful. But a lot of people, they get emotional. They want to be part of something bigger, and they jump onto that and it bandwagons. And we have a lot of knee-jerk legislation that just makes our job harder. It makes us harder to effectively protect the public and catch bad guys. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. I hope I answered your question, Sam. Other folks, if you have any insight, retorts, or input, I'd love to hear it. But you got to hit like on this YouTube video and post a comment so I can know what you want me to talk about. So anyway, kind of wrap it up. We do have some great stuff that happens. Like I said, sometimes you give someone a second chance at life. You get to do CPR, and I'm not a medic by any means, but right place, right time, and got this lady a second chance. So that makes me feel really good. So there is some really good stuff that happens too. It's not all negative. Sadly, not sadly, I guess the positive is I got to share this fabulous mustache with you all. But sadly, again, it's reaching power levels and levels of sexiness that I don't feel I can control anymore. So I'm gonna have to shave it off here in a couple of days until next November. Anyway, I hope to hear from you, and I hope you found this interesting. And give me a shout or send me a message or make a comment on some things you'd like me to talk about. One of the things someone did mention is they want to know what it is like in the life of a cop. Like, what does my day look like? So I'll try to put together my thoughts on that. And then for all you cops out there, remember, on your team, are you an asset or are you a liability? It's up to you to decide which one and push towards that. So with that said, till the next one.